The way we look at digital, and of course, it's such a big topic, and the word itself is often interpreted in many different ways. But the way we interpret digital is on three levers, three large levers, right? The first lever is also, we call that the enterprise building blocks. And these are just setting in the right infrastructure from a technical point of view, just to make sure that the infrastructure is there for us to do things. And that's why we call them building blocks. And for us, these are things like putting in data and making sure that we can orchestrate and organize the data, making sure cybersecurity is in place, connectivity, and the last one is cloud journey. So these are under the banner of the building blocks. Once we have the building blocks, then the second lever is working with the businesses to find the right problems or the right pain points and start looking at what can we do to create digital solutions for them. And we use the word digital solutions, but it's all encompassing, right? It's working together, looking at the process flows, disrupting things, coming up with smarter ways and faster ways of doing things. So that's the second lever. And the third one is really about capability and competency. And how do we advocate digital? How do we make sure that we can upskill and reskill Petronas workforce? So when we talk about digital, it's actually three things. There's a stream on the building blocks, there's a stream on looking at what are the right problems and coming up with solutions to them. And the third one is really about upskilling and reskilling and creating a culture, right? Innovation, creating a culture of digital. Yeah, so that's roughly how we look at it. I think there's a few examples, but just at the top of my head, I guess, from a customer, one of the most easily recognizable is perhaps Settle. Settle is, the whole idea was that we had customers already in our stations. And the customers were there to do a multitude of roles, but when we ask them, they still see that activity of putting fuel. It's something that you don't need to do it, but it's a forced activity in life. It's something that you need to do it just because it's necessary, right? But they're already there. So the idea of Settle is that we say that, look, since they're already there in our asset, how can we make their experience more delightful? So that's first. People think of Settle as a payment app. It's not. It's really an experience app. So we wanted to make sure that when people come to our station, how can we delight them? And the idea is, as we delight them, they will come to the station more, but then they will become more sticky and they will start doing things and buy things, and we can monetize things over on the core experience. And then as that goes along, we start now looking at beyond the station experience as well. So it started from a pain point of customers already in our assets, engaging with our businesses, but then we start layering these experiences, and now we're even going beyond. So what started as payment for fuel became an ability to check and earn loyalty points, payments for things within the store, and then we look at merchandise, we look at things like things to do with drivers like car insurance, and now we're growing those use cases, right? So from creating a customer experience, really understanding their pain points and growing on top of it. I love the Settle experience because it's really a microcosm of that whole transformation journey in digital, right? On one part, you got to have a team that's really obsessed with the customers. So that team, in the early days especially, there was a lot of doing things like ethno studies, really understanding the customers, their pain points, and then being able to turn that into an intuitive experience using digital. Right, so in terms of making sure that the ethno is curated back into a product journey, into the UI UX, and then coding it back into an app that is light enough and not heavy, and being able to be responsive. The idea on the app itself that it must just work. But even when the app was ready, there was a lot of interface that needs to happen with the core tech as well. So this is where the enterprise building blocks comes in, because we need to almost refurbish the whole pump, pay at pump, automation and digital in the pump itself and in the station itself. We need to change things like the connectivity, because the current landlines that we had before wasn't able to support Settle. So we could do an app, but it probably take 5 minutes to open the app, right? And that then, no matter how much you put emphasis on the UI UX and the journey of the app itself, if the network and the infrastructure is not able to support it, it will not work, right? So it's really about doing everything all at once and then using it and looking at it from the customer lens. Digital is not cheap. It's not. And if somebody says that it's cheap and all that, it's a lie. It's a fallacy. It's not cheap. But I think we need to look at the value that it creates. So when we do this, and that's why when you mentioned as well, the emphasis must always be finding the right problem and finding the right pain point so that the value can be tangible. So for example, what we do in the early days was under Operation Excellence was things like we have what we call Alpha LNG. The idea of Alpha LNG was that we recognized from the onset that in the LNG business, it requires massive coordination between upstream, between the plant, between the traders, and then having the customers. So for the longest time, we were debating about should we produce to sell or should we sell what we produce? And there's merits on both, right? But in order to do that, that decision is not like opening a tap of water. Once the upstream has produced and it goes to the LNG plant, if suddenly the marketers say they don't want to sell, then what happens to the cargo? Conversely, if market is good and the marketers say that I want to have extra LNG cargoes, it's not like the plant can just open a tap of water, right? So this looks like a ripe opportunity for digital to come in to create that seamless line of sight. And that's what Alpha LNG was. It's a platform that we connected all the supply chain, and with that ability to have line of sight, we can start doing things like simulations. We can do things like if market hits a certain barrels, how far back do we need to create production, what will be the ramp up in the plant and all that. And when we started out, of course, we are now able to optimize the whole chain. We are able to squeeze out more cargoes. And it's those things that perhaps the value is exponential when you get it right? The other one, I guess, is things like we call ARIS. ARIS is again using analytics and AI in terms of enhancing the optimization of refineries. So what it means is rather than invest in new machinery, just by enhancing the ability to improve the reliability of some of the machines, making sure that there's predictive maintenance in the machines, that means that the same asset and the same refinery is able to churn out 2 to 3% more fuel, for example. So those are the things that we look at. When we look at problems, right now we categorize the digital solutions into operational plant efficiency. That's one core bucket within the problems. The other one is really revenue and cost savings, and the third one is enhancing productivity. So all our solutions are bucketed into those core three portfolios so that we have a bit more focus. We always say getting your foot through the door and having a seat at the table is really, really important when you want to drive this large corporate transformation with large investments, right? And I think, we're really lucky to have a very supportive and visionary leadership and the board that is very supportive. But having said that, I think as usual there is steps on advocacy and upskilling, and we all learn together as well. And we take in the early years our board and our top management on that journey as well. As we're learning and upskilling ourselves, we do things like board away days where we call external experts to come in, and where the board is engaged in terms of the value and the successes. We look at common pitfalls as well. We bring in a lot of outside-in experiences so that we can learn. And I think by growing together, that advocacy and they feel they're also part of this journey, rather than it's just one group trying to push this agenda through, right? And so it really becomes a corporate agenda, and I think that really helps. The second one, I think, is, when we start with use cases, and you always want to prioritize them and make sure that prioritization is really, you got to be almost brutal in that prioritization, right? You want to go on big cases, but some fast results as well. And with those fast results, you want to really celebrate and make sure that the whole organization see those tangible results. Because through those small results, that's where people get more and more confident. If you go for a really big story, but it takes 3 years, organizational patience will run thin. But as long as they see incremental results, I think people are more supportive, and that creates that momentum going forward. If we look back collectively, I think it's to be wary about this term digitizing and digital, because the nuances are actually very small. And I think people confuse IT, digitization, and digital. So I've seen, and perhaps we have done the same mistakes, that we spend money, investments merely digitizing, in the sense that we take a manual process or a manual template, and what we do is we put it online. And yet the same processes and all that, we don't disrupt, we don't change. Then the value is not really there. Number two, I guess, is the difference between IT and digital again. IT is a core, again, building block. It's a core skill, it's a core layer that you need to build digital on. So IT is really important. But an IT mindset and mental model is significantly different than digital. Again, IT is what I call known knowns. Right? You know the problem, you know what needs to happen. The idea is, the challenge is just getting the right technology, equipment to be able to execute it and roll it out. So the IT world is more of the client telling the IT practitioners, this is what I want, and then they do the service. But that is not digital, because digital is really about the unknown unknowns. So if you go through a digital journey like an IT mindset, that's going to be a problem. Because then the digital practitioners will go to the business and ask, what do you want? Can you give me a form or a service request, and then I will just do it. Then what happens is the business will start giving requests. I want this app, I want that app. Next thing you know, you're just building a lot of apps. But neither party really understand the unknown unknowns, right? So I think in digital, rather than it's a one-way street, it's really immersing the two teams together, the business and the functional experts with the digital experts, gelling together and say, let's go on this journey on understanding the pain points. What are the process that I want to disrupt? And then putting a solution. But not just one solution. And say that, okay, we've got the first iteration. Does it help? What other things do we need to improve? So a true digital solution will have a finite life, right? Because you build on top of it. Whereas IT is just about, this is your solution. Thank you very much. Call me back when you have something else. When you have problems. So I think those two things are really critical. And the third one, I think, is, I talked about people, I talked about infrastructure, I thought about the right solutions. It's the challenge of getting the sweet spot to do them at the same time. You need to build, I guess, that flywheel of success, where one thing enhances the other. And if you want to keep finding the right solutions, but like I said, the infrastructure is not there, then people are still not going to get a good experience. If you focus on building the infrastructure first, that's a lot of money spent with no value. Then your board is going to get impatient. But if, again, the last one is, even if you have the right infrastructure and the right problems, but the culture and the people is not upskilled, then again, you're not going to get adoption to come in. But if you spend too much time on upskilling people, but there's no solution, then people cannot practice, right? So it's really about doing all these three levers at the same time and orchestrating that sweet spot. I think that's hard, and that's the challenge for digital practitioners. The role of CDO is not just a technical expert or a technical advisor or consultant. It really is about understanding the core pain points of the organization. There's no such thing to me as a digital transformation. It's the business transformation that needs to happen first. And if you understand the goals of the business transformation, what they want to achieve, digital is there to kind of put steroids on it and make it happen, right? So as the Chief Digital Officer, for me, the first and most critical thing is to understand your customer or your business and the goals of that business. You really need to be able to understand and what are the priorities of the business leaders. That's one. Number two, it is then a lot of orchestration work. So it's more of Chief Orchestration Officer, because digital is about disrupting processes, and when you disrupt process, it's not linear. You have to engage a lot of stakeholders, you have to orchestrate in between various parties. So that's really the second role, which is the orchestration role. The third one is really, you got to advocate, which is a lot of persuasion, and like you said, when things are not going right in terms of the solutions are not there, you need to have conviction and being able to convince the customers, the investors, and the stakeholders, the board members, that this is still the right path. So the third role is more of marketing, advocacy, and in between marketing / poster boy as well, and getting people excited about it. So it's a lot of advertising, promotion, marketing role. So I see a CDO role as a combination of a business leader that understands the business objectives and pain point, a chief orchestrator that mediates and links up various stakeholders, and the third one is a bit of a poster boy or a marketing guy. So that's how I approach this role. Yeah, so for Petronas, we have this core strategy of MFT 50-30-0, which is operational excellence and enhancing our revenue. The 0 is really about energy transition and sustainability, which I still believe that digital has a core role on that as well. There's a middle bit on this as well, which is trying to grow revenue streams and new businesses that is not on the back of traditional oil and gas. So this is where we also look at how digital can create new ventures and new opportunities for Petronas that is beyond oil and gas. So one example of this is, which there's going to be an announcement soon, and I'm very excited about that. We worked with partners to create a new venture where we use digital and our assets and our capability. We call it Steer. And the idea is to redefine logistics solutions, especially in terms of marine logistics. So because we are in oil and gas, we deal with a lot of logistics and transportation. But we recognize that, for example, a lot of the vessels, there's a lot of idle time, both in terms of the vessel, the routing, and also in terms of the storage. So the idea is, how can we Uberize or this logistics, so that we can really optimize and do a bit more sharing, for example, in the industry. So this is one opportunity that we're using digital, collaborating with partners in the industry, and because of this, create a new revenue stream for Petronas. The other one is, as we go on this digital transformation journey, we realize that we require a lot of solutions, and we've put forth, I guess, a product roadmap and a capex and a budget for it. Whether we like it or not, this is something that we need to spend and invest on. But rather than just use this on a normal transaction mode where we go deal by deal, and perhaps you don't get opportunities to unlock, we want to work with more partners. For example, that we can co-create and co-invest in these solutions, so that maybe we can, for example, one of the challenge we have is talents. It's getting so hard to get good talents in digital. I think there needs to be a lot more concentrated effort in upskilling talents and getting that pipeline of digital talents faster and more ready. And when we look at the context of Malaysia, for example, there is a lot more we think we can be done. So based on the current investments that we're going to do anyway, we would love to work with partners to look at how we can co-invest, for example, and setting up a delivery center or COEs within Malaysia, so that we can train more Malaysians. So those are the things that we're changing business models. We're looking at new revenue streams and looking at partnerships as well.